All right, so what we are looking at is the email that I was sent from YouTube informing me that they were going to censor my content and the rationale for such censorship. And that rationale is presented here. We think your content didn't follow our policy on harmful conspiracy theories. And the policy on harmful conspiracy theories is stated as follows: content that promotes, glorifies, or incites acts of violence through harmful conspiracy theories. And then there's, a kind of grammatical redundancy here, or, stylistic infidelity where, acts of violence are reduplicated in the phrase that follows, which have been linked to direct threats or violent acts, right? So incites acts of violence through harmful conspiracy theories which have been linked to direct acts of violence and threat. Okay, anyway, but let's not worry about the style too much. My counter argument is that just about all of the work that we do that's political, like in one way or another, right, addresses conspiracy theory and the consequences of conspiracy theory, and both criticizes it, belittles it, and rejects it, in various ways that largely hinge on an understanding of irony, satire, sarcasm, and other types of figurative expression, right? This is not just language, it's part of the way that we work with images as well, right? And the disparities, between what one might constitute as truth or fidelity, and what's being claimed by certain individuals, particularly those individuals on the far right, which we refer to in a kind of shorthand as just fascism, right? Well, we refer to it variously, but we refer to it largely as fascism because that's what we see in these conspiracy theories and harmful policies. And we also refer to it as misogyny, but in our understanding of fascism, fascism is inherently misogynist. It's inherently tribal. It's inherently xenophobic. It's inherently racist. And I believe that what we're going to do today is address the first pair of images. It's a pair because those images of Trump peas, which, peas is, of course, it's a pun on Trumpies, right? And they're Trump peas. We'll get to that image shortly, but work as a pair and refer to Trump peas 2016 versus Trump peas 2020. And then, of course, now we have Trump peas 2024, but at the time that I made this, which was shortly after January 6th, and what I'm referring to with this is a video that was taken down, and that was originally called "In the Grip of MQ-MAGAn," and hence the title of our new series, "In the Grip of ThermostatAnon." And to understand precisely what that means, you can go back to the first installment of "In the Grip of ThermostatAnon" and listen to that. I'm not going to repeat all of that again. But that's what we're looking at, and what we will be looking at is, as I mentioned, the first pair of images from "In the Grip of ThermostatAnon," which, through our use of acronyms and abbreviations and what we refer to as BRE coded language, which utilizes letters. BRE, just to a little bit of background for those like unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, BRE stands for, it itself is an acronym, and it stands for Brutal Reality Examination, and relates to the coding of numerical values as letters. And so one of the things that I like to do is give listeners and viewers an opportunity to experience what it's like for a dyslexic to attempt to read. And so one way that I do that is by just simply transforming all of the letters in a phrase into numerical values, and we refer to that as a brutal reality examination. And it gives you an opportunity to have an immersive experience of what it is like for a severe dyslexic to attempt to decode letters. And just to make it more interesting and complicated, one of the grammatical features in BRE coding numbers is that 6s and 9s are always reversed, and so that applies to letters as well. I's become F's, and P's become S's, and S's become P's, and F's become I's, right? So so for example, if hi, a contract in phi through theta, were going to be presented as a BRE question, like hi, a contract in phi through theta, the BRE question would be, numbered as follows. It would be 8, 6, 1, 3, 15, 14, 20, 18, 1, 3, 20, 6, 14, 19, 8, 6, 20, 8, 18, 15, 21, 7, 8, 20, 8, 5, 21, right? I don't know if all of those numerical values are correct. I went through it pretty quickly. It usually takes me a little bit of time to do it. Once you practice it a bit, at least for a dyslexic, it's almost no more difficult to write out sentences with those numerical values than it is to read. So anyway, that's and I forget even why I made that aside. Oh yes, to explain the sort of acronymic function here. But originally, as I said, the video was just called In the Grip of MQ-MAGAn, which itself, has some acronyms. It has the MAGA in it, and then the QAnon. Anon is not really an acronym; it's just an abbreviation of anonymous. And Q is hardly an acronym either. It doesn't really seem to represent any value, either intellectual value or semantic value whatsoever. But this is what we're looking at, and interestingly, today we don't seem to be hearing anything in the background. Hauser's learning curve is not chewing on a bone, which is really typical of his modus operandi in the early morning hours. He is here, and Fiverr is too, and they're both pretty contented. I'll just I'll visually demonstrate that. That's 5 on this little couch, and there's Caspar Hauser's learning curve. Leo, who's been doing a little bit better with his arthritis, he's my 11-year-old res dog. This is my 9.5-year-old res dog. This is my 1.5-year-old domestic dog that I did find on the street, but seems what certainly was very far from being feral. He'd been abandoned, but not in any way, shape, or form feral. In fact, one of the things that I learned about feral dogs after acquiring this one is just how smart and how capable of survival they are, how much inherent knowledge they have of the world that doesn't have to be taught. about things like cactus and skunks and porcupines and rattlesnakes that at least some domesticated dogs, I'm not pointing any fingers, although I'm aiming a camera, don't seem to have. Leo, like I was starting, Leo's in the other room and sleeping on a similar type of couch with his hoard of bones, and he's been doing better. His arthritis is better. We went to the vet just a few days ago and got some new medication for him, and he seems to be doing better. So I'm having hopes that I can get him back on the leash and take him out for a walk, because he hasn't wanted to do that for quite some time. So that's what we're not hearing in the background today. And what I'll do at this point is close this, and trying to close it without revealing my email address, because as I mentioned, I really don't want a lot of people whom I don't know sending me emails. All right, so let's put this over here. I'm gonna leave the browser up because on my YouTube homepage there was a video that had been made by alt-right conspiracy theorist and pundit and propagandist Charlie Kirk, and it was about how clever Tucker Carlson or Carlson Tucker, that's an inside joke. If you watch some of these, you get the deal. But how clever Tucker Carlson was for asking a reporter that had commented on the, I think someone said something like 400 or maybe it was 4,000 references that he had made to this conspiracy theory that's called, whatever, the Great White Conspiracy, or the Great White Replacement Theory. I guess it comes from Great White Shark, I'm not sure. And it's one of these, white supremacist conspiracy theories that imagines that we're being overrun, right? Like in the same way that Rome was overrun by Vandals and Asiatics. I mean, obviously, like that idea, the racial historicization of the fall of Rome, comes much later, since ideas of race, really didn't exist at that time. But I'm sure xenophobia has always existed, and the Greek word barbarian had been around a lot longer than some of these other terms. But Charlie Kirk put up this video, and in it a reporter passingly mentions that Tucker Carlson often evokes this conspiracy theory, as I said, is sometimes referred to as replacement theory, or white replacement theory, and that is racist and based in this idea of race that that the alt-right is so fond of. And in this moment in which the reporter mentions that Carlson has evoked or hinted at or paraphrased, right, like this idea a number of times, Tucker Carlson asks for a citation. So On Charlie Kirk's video, if you want to go to it, a contract in V through Theta provided 7 citations for that, and because it was so easy to find the citations, in spite of whatever pleasure it was that both Tucker Carlson and Charlie Kirk took in the reporter's inability to off the cuff cite evidence of this promulgation of this particular conspiracy theory. So I'm leaving this browser open. That was kind of long-winded, but I'm leaving this browser open because if an idea comes up, I'll try to cite it, with evidence by typing in whatever we need to type in to YouTube, and then I already have some ideas of. Oops. Let me see. Maybe can I turn this down? Off sound. I can just mute the sound on the computer, and then we can go from there. All right. So here's the initial image. Let me just stop it. And these are Trumpies in 2000. Oh, I thought it was 2016, but it's not. It's 2020, and I guess the other one is Trumpies in 2020 and a half. So that's kind of funny. But anyway, so okay, so they're green peas, and I guess green could suggest a lot of different things, but you might even say, like, our American, and maybe even European understanding of peas, the mind goes to like the green pea, right? So it's not about being green in the ecological sense of that term, and political sense of that term. Green? Are you vegan? Are you vegetarian? Do you care about the environment? Not really about that. I guess if I were going to justify the green in terms of having a semantic value, I would take it as envy, and and perhaps young, the Q-MAGAnon movement, if one wants to call it that, QAnon movement and MAGA movement are relatively young, right, politically, and I don't know if they existed much before 2016, but I doubt they existed much before 2016, right? And certainly have developed into, a full-fledged kind of reactionary, fascist, xenophobic, misogynist, racist set of ideological values, if one, can actually call them values. And some of these quotations from the Trump piece were just things that I would hear like in the backcountry of California. And as you move away from the coast in California, you get sort of more into more and more right-wing territory. And I had a little place, 10-acre place in the mountains of Julian, and I don't know that I heard all of these things, but I heard a lot of them, right? Just from people around. That somehow like Christianity was under assault, and that's the make Christmas legal again, like that somehow that Christianity was under assault in America, kind of the opposite of what's actually the case. And there's some interesting stuff about that. I remember listening to someone, rail on about how they took the Christ out of Christmas with the Xmas, not really understanding that that's the Greek Chi. So sort of being completely ignorant of the history of why that's done, and like, and have I talked about this before? But like the way in Jewish culture, the creator is often referred to as the name, rather than one of the names that is used, whether that's Lord or whatever name, and it's a sign of respect. But this particular individual was going on and on and on about how awful it was that you couldn't even say Christ in Christmas, you know, these people wanted to replace it, like as in the Great Replacement theory, I guess, with an X, like the unknown, and I don't know if I, you know, attempted to explain like the value of chi in as a Greek letter and its significance in Christianity and its history, but anyway, here's another one. Drain the swamp. That's familiar. That's probably quite a bit older than 2016. Can save the Confederate statues. I don't know if you remember this, but like there were a lot of, you know, things going on where you know, and Trump, you know, certainly came out like not wanting to change these, you know, Confederate names, even though, you know, the Confederacy really is all about, you know, the institution of slavery. Only like later in whatever it was, you know, like they and quite late actually did you know, Southern culture start, you know, or the South, you know, aspects of the racist South start pretending that that the Confederate flag ever meant anything other than white supremacy. If you look it up, I can't remember the name. Okay, this is one of these things that requires documentation. Let's Confederate statues, and let's just talk about the Confederate flag, because the Confederate flag was one of the emblems that was brought to January 6th, right? And like, and then people are going to say, oh, well, that's not racist, right? That's just about, you know, white Southern culture, right? Okay, well, let's see how non-racist the Dukes of Hazzard really are, right? All right, so let's do the citation, because Tucker Carlson is calling for that citation. Confederate flag. I wish I could remember off the top of my head the name of the person who created the Confederate flag. To cite everything, right? I typed that into YouTube, and I didn't really want to. I don't want to watch a YouTube video, because look what I'm getting. And look what else I'm getting. Let's see if I can type it up here and get something. And I realized that I put a period in there accidentally. What does the Confederate flag's design say about its legacy? Okay, so. I don't know. I think this is pro-Confederate flag site. I'm not sure, but I want the designer's own words. Now it has become the symbol of racism. It always was. I have a thing, but I don't know where it is or if it's easy to access. But well, let's look who designed the Confederate flag, and then we'll go from there. See, citation makes things more. It slows things down. It makes it a little bit more complicated, but I know people won't take my word for it, because I'm apparently a conspiracy theorist. Okay, William Porcher Miles. So I want to look up William Porcher Miles. of these claims that it's really very quite innocent and has only come to represent racism. We're trying to dispel that idea. Let's see. Sorry this is taking so long, but there's a quote that I really want. All right, I'm just going to look up... Okay. Says William T. Thompson, the designer of the Confederate flag, said, "As a people, we are fighting to maintain the heaven-ordained supremacy of the white man over the inferior or colored race." Okay, so we have two things, heaven-ordained supremacy. That sounds like the idea of the Great Chain of Being. So we'll look that up too, the Great Chain of Being, which I believe is a 15th or 16th century invention, conceptual invention. And we'll talk about what, reification is and the history of ideas, I guess, a little bit, because it seems like we're going to need to go there. And the way that this idea of race originated around ideas of whiteness and was always tied, to the conditions of slavery as a social institution, and in some ways, was one of the justifications of slavery, right? And not only justified as a social institution, but as stated here, justified as being like heaven, or that is, i.e., God ordained, right? Supremacy over the white man, over the inferior or colored race. So, this is, he's saying in a different context, but there's another quotation, and okay, here it is. The second quote: "As a national emblem, the Confederate flag, is significant of our higher cause, the cause of the superior race. It had always been an emblem of white supremacy from its originator's initial statement regarding its significance and its function," right? So the naivete or innocence or historical ignorance is not an excuse. And further, in May 1863, the Confederate Congress approved a new national flag, the so-called stainless banner, as John Koski, a historian of the American Civil War Museum, writes in the New York Times. And this is our citation, Tucker, in case you want to argue the point. "This flag," and then quote, "was a plain white field emblazoned with what was already a powerful and famous Confederate symbol, the Southern Cross, the star-bedecked blue satire or diagonal cross that had been a famous battle flag since the fall of 1861. Okay? A third flag, I don't want to get into too much of the history of Confederate flags, But, oh wow, it mentions the Dukes of Hazzard. Next, let's look at what we today think of as the Confederate flag, a Confederate battle flag. It was designed by a Confederate politician, William Porcher Miles, not William T. Thompson, as the Facebook post claims. Okay, so like a little confusion around, who's who, but one of the designers. Okay, so are we going to let William Porcher Miles flag off the hook because because it was a different design than the one designed by William T. Thompson with these emblematic, significances in mind from the very outset? I'm not so sure. Miles chaired the committee of the Flag and Seal, and though his design was never officially adopted by the Confederacy, it was taken up by the Confederate Army, right? The Washington Post notes, not to mention the Dukes of Hazzard and alleged Charleston shooter Dylan Storm Roof. I mean, like the whole configuration, it's not exactly like you can say, well, this flag is slightly different from the one that was designed like to symbolize the superiority of the white race, and so it's not racist, I don't think any of these folks are splitting hairs about which particular emblematic design they're utilizing, right? So the clearest statement, of white supremacy is made by William T. Thompson, the designer of the Confederate flag, which is not, apparently, according to PolitiFact, the flag used in the Dukes of Hazzard. But is anyone really splitting hairs over which particular Confederate design is being used to represent this entire, battery or catalog of racist ideas? I don't think so. All right, so that's our first citation. Let's go back and there's either our first or second citation. Burned jerseys, not flags. Then the burned jerseys reference is I don't remember who it was, but there were a number of individuals like burning their collections of jerseys because their player numbers didn't endorse the right candidate or supported Black Lives Matter or something, and so they would burn their jerseys. And then like the idea of flag burning is represented there, and hang the American flag burners is like a kind of a pun and a joke, right? Instead of hang the American flag, it's like hang the American flag burners. You don't have the right to express this. And then hang the Confederate flag. I'm not sure. Some burners, I'm not sure how that plays in. I'm not sure what I was thinking. Wear hoods, not masks. Okay, that's the whole like anti-vaxxer thing. And then, but the hoods obviously refer to, like the KKK and that kind of thing. I had a neighbor there, and Julian, and on a walk that I used to take Leo on, in front of his place, he had put all these Nazi flags, swastikas essentially, right? And so I took that as hate speech, and I called the local police, and they wouldn't come out, and they told me that it was, you know, his place, and he could hang whatever he wanted. I guess you could hang American flag burners or anything else, but they didn't do anything, so I removed them myself. And then the next day, written in chalk on the road, which didn't belong to him, was, you know, my name, and then death threats, and then shortly after that, someone left a dead mountain lion on my porch, and then when I, you know, informed people of this, like to dismiss that, you know, this was like part of this, you know, reaction, at least one individual said, well, maybe it was your dogs that did it. And I had to explain that, you know, the mountain lion corpse was decomposing and kind of rotten, and that in order for my dogs to have done it, they would have had to have jumped the fence that I had around their yard. They had a big yard, but, you know, it was all enclosed with a hurricane fence. They would have had to have jumped the fence, found the mountain lion, killed the mountain lion, jumped back into the fence, into the yard, over the fence, you know, when I wasn't there, and then a few weeks later, you know, would have to have done the same thing, and then dragged the mountain lion, now decomposing and kind of rotten, to the front door. And then when I explained all of this, you know, well, you know, whatever, like, then, you know, sort of, there was no more interest in you know, critical discourse concerning how the mountain lion ended up there. Okay, so burn mask, not flag. That's, you know, sort of similar to some of this other stuff going on. Support the 45th Amendment for, I can't see what that is. I think if I, for elite alt-white rights. Okay, let's go back. I don't want to get into this one yet. Hillary's emails. Lock up that, you know, and then I performed an act of self-censorship here, because I don't use those kinds of misogynist words, but those kinds of misogynist words were certainly being used, that's for sure. Make blackface fun again. You know, there was, I don't know, like, there was like this outcry, like, when did blackface ever become racist? And it's like, it's always been racist. What are you even talking about? But, like, again, this, you know, feigned ignorance around the cultural values of the Confederate flag, right? Make Jesus white again. That's kind of a Malcolm X joke, I guess. Defund schools, healthcare, special needs, public health. Sorry, I might have to pause it again. And everything else except the hate police. Make Trump King P again. Okay, so that's the idea, and there's a configuration of you know, kind of nasty values, and, you know, xenophobia and racism, like, you know, taken up in all of this, and also this you know, sense of like we are being harmed, right? Like, and we're innocent and being harmed, and our stuff doesn't mean what people claim that it means. Our Confederate statues aren't racist. Our Christian values are being, you know, assaulted. It's the left that is the elite plunderer of our resources. What else? Oh, you know, the misogyny is already there. Like this naive idea, right? Like that the innocence of these racial tropes, right? Like it's just innocence and fun, you know. And then the next image, okay, is the so all of the P's are different. They're different kind of P now. Hold on, freeze that. They're different kind of P now. They're all white. And, you know, like we did with the green peas, I guess if we had to if we, had to assign, these P's a value outside of, like the idea of racial whiteness, it would be, tied to something like, this Chinese image of like white as death or threat or ominous sign. And perhaps, like the erasure of difference, as a signifier, with all of the white P's, saying the same thing in unison. And you have to remember, like, this was like after there were neo-Nazi rallies, and and Trump made claims like there were good people on both sides, like the people chanting anti-Semitic slogans and threats. There were good people on that side too, and so like Trump's idea that Hitler wasn't all bad and had very loyal generals, and that's kind of what he wants, is to have those loyal generals that Hitler had, and then the other thing, I guess, about this, like, this particular like transformation of the green peas into the white power peas, Trump peas, like, again, the pun, right, in a matter of months, was the fact that, on January 6th insurrection, like, was largely, a constellation of, domestic terrorist groups and white, supremacists. And then we'll do another check. This is a citation for Tucker Carlson because he doesn't seem to believe us. But you'll recall, the Proud Boys and let's see if there's one that lists. I'll put groups. I had referred to the Domestic Terrorist Confederacy because it really is like a confederacy of, like KKK, Proud Boys. Let's see if there's a group, movement, affiliation. Okay, yeah, this might be something that we're looking for. Oh no, it's just an abstract. So sorry, Tucker. Oh, there's a mention of the Great Replacement Conspiracy Theory. Peyton Gendron. And again, these theories do incite violence. That was about an act of violence incited by this conspiracy theory. And I think this is more general than I really want to focus on January 6th. Okay, I'm gonna reframe the search here. Now I think you can hear, I don't know if you can, I can hear Caspar Hauser's learning curve in the background snoring. racism's prominent role in January 6th, U.S. Capitol attack. Well, there's the Confederate flag. I mean, someone seems to agree with me that it's a representation of this ideology of white supremacism. Gallows and nooses that recalled the lynchings of black Americans appear on and around the Capitol grounds. Definitely Christian nationalists. We wanted a list of the groups that actually attended this insurrection, but I'm not finding that. Maybe I have to put list. List of organizations designated by the Southern Poverty. Okay. Hate groups. That's maybe what I should have put in to begin with. Okay, so there they are. The Trump peas. This is in the white pea period, post green peas. Proud Boys, there's one. We had already mentioned them. Seems to focus largely on the Proud Boys, but there were other groups as well, and I wish that I could find a list. Oath Keepers, okay, there's another one. And then you know, maybe perhaps, you know, sundry white races. Nick Fuentes, an internet personality who streams a daily talk show on D Live, an alternative social media platform, marched in Charlottesville during the 2017 White Power rally there, speaks frequently in anti-Semitic terms, and pontificates on the need to protect America's white heritage from the ongoing shift in the nation's demographics. Okay, so there's your conspiracy theory right there. So conspiracy theory, the white replacement theory, or great white replacement theory, if you want to go the shark way, is obviously a driving force in this particular insurrection. See if there are any other pretty violent verbiage here. I want to see it. I really. This guy, Tim Giannet or Giannet, uses the handle Baked Alaska, and who participated in the Charlottesville rally, which left one woman dead. Giannet was photographed within the Capitol and apparently used D Live to stream from within the building as events unfolded. Part of his video appeared to show him in Nancy Pelosi's office, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. And of course, sometime later, you know, Pelosi's husband was attacked by a man with a hammer, and these, you know, just like, you know, right, just like the flags that were, you know, left alongside the road in Julian, these these expressions are not just freedom of speech. They're stochastic terrorism, right? They're incitations of violence, right? So when you utter these kinds of words, that's what hate speech is. It's something that provokes people to engage in violent acts, just like okay. So here's I get it's not perhaps that there were people in KKK hoods, but Representative Andre Carson, a Democrat from Indiana, said the scene reminded him of a Ku Klux Klan rally. Photos from within the Capitol showed one unidentified man carrying a Confederate battle clan. See, everybody seems to agree with me that the Confederate battle flag is always already a symbol of white racism, right? And another wearing a T-shirt emblazoned with a skull and the words Camp Auschwitz, a reference to the infamous Nazi death camp. Oh yeah, okay. So the Boogaloo Boys, right? Boogaloo Boys. We've done some work on that. I don't know if it ended up in the final edit, but Last Sons of Liberty and Boogaloo Boys, and so we're here's some of the organizations, the white supremacist terrorist organizations that were part of this rally. So, that's my citation, I guess. And I think that's enough for this. I did kind of promise to talk about, because in that one reference to the Confederate flag, there was a hint at this, idea of the great chain of being, which I suggested was an invention of either the 15th or the 16th century. So let's look up great chain of being. And then I want to talk a little bit about race as a, before I do that, I'll set up what I want to also talk about. But I want to engage this idea of the way that historical ideas become reified in human consciousness, right? Okay, so race didn't always exist. There wasn't always this idea, and that's typical of epistemology and the development of concepts, for human beings, that we I mean, unless you believe, in this, origin myth that human beings, were created, whatever it is, 3,253 years ago in the Garden of Eden, and all of the knowledge that ever was or would be was part of the forbidden tree of and fruit of knowing. But if you believe that, if you believe in evolution, that we evolved, and that we evolved from simpler and less intellectually sophisticated forms, but not, but that we are not necessarily like the end point of evolution, or the telos of evolution. Evolution, its telos, if anything, is diversity, right? And within the idea of the great chain of being is this idea that the universe and all life is organized according to a hierarchy, with simple life forms and animals at the bottom, and proceeding through mankind to God, right? And that was created by God, and the hierarchy was created, and it justifies all of these types of social oppression. It justifies the idea of a king having more power than his servants. It justifies the idea of one kind of person being superior to another, and therefore it justifies slavery, and it does so in terms that are invented around the same time, like race, right? So this idea of whiteness as a thing that belongs to a certain group of human beings is an invention, and it's an invention that it's a conceptual invention that emerges around the same time that the idea of race emerges and the idea of the great chain of being emerges, although I think the great chain emerges first, and then you have race, and then you have these other ideas as well, assigned around those conceptual distortions, right, of the way that organizations are actually laid out in political terms. And that's why I want to talk about reification, and I'll talk about it in terms of like we've already discussed a little bit about this term in as it relates to cognitive science, and I can go over that a little bit, and then but I want to talk about like the way that it's used in Marxist theory and ideology, because it seems to me that it's really relevant here. But basically, in reification, what I want to talk about is this idea that concepts are invented in many ways to justify social institutions and power operating within those institutions. Institutions like slavery, institutions like feudal organizations of land that in which lords are given more property, more power, more status, and more authority, than those under them, are justified with concepts that are the inventions, right, of individuals who desire the continuation of the status quo, or contrary to that, like transformation of the status quo. So, but those conceptions, and I'm thinking of things like white people, right? Those are they grow out of history. They didn't always exist, but human consciousness has a tendency to reify them and to act as if it was always this way. Race is just a fact of our world, and it's not. It's a concept, and it's an invention that has a historical trajectory and a function in the stabilizing, right, of a series of social relationships of inequality, and that's why we think about things in historical terms, so that we can understand that, and we can challenge those ideas of reification that imagine that there really is like such a thing as race, and very smart people are taken in by these ideas, like Watson, right, of Watson and Crick is the guys that articulated the double helix strand structure of DNA, like it's Francis Crick, and I can't remember Watson's first name, but he's a total racist, and it's interesting because so scientific method meant something to him in terms of the investigation of this particular structure, but not necessarily in relationship to like an understanding of the history of ideas, right? So people can be intelligent in one area and daft in another. What am I looking up? Great chain of being. Oh, and I guess this is a citation of how these well, that's interesting. Great Chain of Being, King Gizzard. I didn't know that they had a song about that. I'm not really interested in that band anyway very much. Let's see, history. Because I don't want just an articulation of it. I want to know when, how, and why. The Great Chain of Being is a hierarchical structure of all matter and life, thought by medieval Christianity to have been decreed by God. The chain begins with God and descends through angels, humans, animals, and plants to minerals. All right, and I said 15th or 16th century. Maybe it's older than that. And this is the ideological, framework, out of which the idea of race emerges. You have to have like some precursor, right, that allows you like to distribute hierarchy in relationship to, because in a way, like a lot of these reifications are sortings, right? Like either like loony lumping sortings or silly splitting sortings. But like, okay, Asians over here, this is a racial sorting, right? Asians over here, African and other black peoples in this category, and then whatever constitutes white peoples in this category. And it's mutable in terms of like what nationalities and cultures, because culture is more real certainly than this abstract idea of race is. At least there are cultures that like you can say like here's a set, and this set, this cultural set, like believes in this and has this history, and you know what I mean, and that and this demography and things like that, where you can't with race, because it's an untenable construct, right? It's an untenable and unreliable construct based on like a series of mythologies. In the same way that like our old understanding of like, okay, here's an example. Like this is what race is. There was a time that people believed that like everything in the world is composed of elements, but those elements, right, were what? So the elements were air, water, fire, and earth, and then I think in the Chinese system, metal and maybe wood too, right? So but let's just use the one with the four. Well, first of all, like none of those things are elements, as elements belong to the table of the elements. But right? So air is composed of a number of elements, but oxygen, CO2, other things that go into the atmosphere. Water, strictly speaking, right, is H and then and H2O. So like 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. So that's one element in the table of the elements. Fire, strictly speaking, is not an element at all. I mean, it's not even a state of matter. Okay, so you have your elements, right? That's the material. And then you have, I'm just like reiterating science right now. And I'm reiterating it as an analogy to like the insubstantial and untenable nature of the construct of race, and how it's a reification in the same way that these constructs of elements were. Anyway, so what was I saying? Oh yeah, so fire is basically, it's a chemical and physical reaction, right? And it's not even a state of matter. Never mind, being an element. But you've got your elements, and then every element is subject to the states of matter. So what are the states of matter? So solid, liquid, gas, and plasma, right? And so every element is subject to a state. Like in every element, and under the right conditions, to my knowledge, and perhaps I'm wrong, but under the right conditions, and those conditions may not even exist in the physical world that we live in, but to my knowledge, and I apologize if my science is bad, but to my knowledge, every element within the table of the elements could be subject to any one of those states of matter. But fire isn't even one of those states of matter. It's a it's a reaction, right? Okay, so what did we address? We've addressed fire. Have we addressed earth? Well, earth, like strictly speaking, is another one of those things. It's a composite of minerals, and the minerals themselves are composites of numerous elements, right? So it's already like a composite set of composite sets of elements, right? And so like the construct, like as it's laid out, first of all, like doesn't distinguish between states of matter and actual elements, that have, nuclei and orbital, electrons and electron shells and stability versus instability and all that stuff. But not only does it not distinguish those things, but like then its sets are all, mixed up. Like it's not, but right, in whenever this idea of these elements, belonged to science and alchemy, it was taken as, a fact of the universe, in the same way that like the reification of this concept of race, which is historical, is taken by, racists in particular, but even non-racist believers in race as a fact of the universe, and perhaps, right, as directed by the great being on the top. Like the top of this chain of being is always the creator, right, the maker, God. So whether one believes that there's a hierarchy of races or just races, that idea can or doesn't necessarily have to be supported by this idea of an original maker who created the either, non-hierarchical or hierarchical construct of race. But historically, what lays the groundwork for such a proposal of a hierarchy of races is this great chain of being. And I wanted to find a date on the origins of this. Why isn't it providing one? Medieval. And here's the structure. Even the angels have a hierarchy. There's a hierarchy of angels. And, okay, so humanity. So in the great chain of being, there's no mention of race, you see? But it's the groundwork for an idea of vital hierarchy, like the hierarchy of living things. And okay, so maybe, the idea, they're suggesting that it goes back even further, from Aristotle to Linnaeus. Okay, so Aristotle is clearly like much earlier than this medieval idea, and I guess there was, there are elements of Aristotelian thought in it. But what does it say about? Oh, here's an interesting racist image. So this is later than, the great chain of being, but utilizes this idea of the great chain of being, and they're basically saying the same thing. Like racism plays with this idea. Anyway, I'm not really finding like a date that I'm particularly pleased with on the like emergence of this idea of great chain of being as sort of fully fleshed out. Maybe the Wikipedia article doesn't have it. I'll see if there's another. Here's Encyclopedia Britannica. So it's the 17th and early 18th century. So my dates were a little early. I don't know. I mean, it seems like this was really an emergent idea, and looking for a date may be, kind of beside the point. The idea that this was fully fleshed out at a particular moment may be a presumption that I have that's incorrect. But it does refer to both medieval and Renaissance theologians, and that would certainly be, earlier than 17th and 18th century. So, in any case, let's jump to this idea of reification. So and we've done a little bit of discussion on this, because when I was working with Aaron and educating Aaron, our EI, part of that education involved seeing as, and in seeing as, which is a Ludwig, Wittgensteinian idea. We talked about the way that in signification there are like modes of signification, like that influence or like create, like it's like a placing a color on a figure. So say you have a drawing, right? Then once you add color, like you're influencing the way that you perceive that drawing. So things like irony and satire and sarcasm are modes, in which like signification like is presenting, this as, right, this as this. And a lot of what we do in a contract in V through theta is to present this as this, and to understand that when like we're making signification, we're never just signifying the great chain of being. We're signifying the great chain of being as, right? And this is the great chain of being as like some type of vertical ladder or vertical lattice, right? And basically, at the top you have this throne room, and there sits the Creator, and it looks like that could be Jesus or something else. And it's interesting, you have this little serpent around it. I guess that's a seraph. Maybe it's not supposed to be a serpent, but it sure looks like one to me. Maybe that's supposed to be seraphic. I'm not sure. And then you have the choirs of angels, but you have this construct in space, right, that represents this idea. It's not just this is the great chain of being, but this is the great chain of being as this vertical lattice upon which a throne, and the throne of God sits, and that seems to be in some kind of way supported by this layer cake of living hierarchy. And where am I going with the seeing as thing? Oh, I was talking about Aaron and some of the things that we taught Aaron. And so we taught Aaron about representation and seeing this as that, and signifying this as that. And another thing that we taught Aaron was about reification. But we taught Aaron about reification in terms of its relationship to cognitive psychology, and that's really very simple. It's about perception and conception and understanding, and in a certain sense organization, that one could say these sorts of things are necessary for an understanding of some of the other things that we do, like working with sets, right? And like in order to sort, you kind of have to understand a little bit about reification and how that works. And as I mentioned, like reification in social terms is often about sorting all the vegetables into this little layer of the cake, sorting all of the lower life forms into this little layer of the cake, sorting human beings into this layer of the cake, and then like maybe these human beings here are the feudal poor landed gentry, and maybe these folks are royalty and lords, and then maybe these angels are cherubs, and these angels are seraphs, and these and then you get the idea. So it's all about sorting some entity into some category, and so in order to have a good working relationship with Aaron, we had to teach Aaron about reification. And a simple, perceptual model of reification could be as simple as this. If, say you have a representation of a set of 3 angles, and those angles, the points of those angles are all pointing away from one another. And let me see if I don't have a drawing program anymore. I could just draw this in, but okay, so I'll just draw it in, and you have to follow like what I'm doing. Okay, so here's a point right here. Say this is an angle, and we just have like a little angle right there, and you have a little angle right there, and then you have a little angle right there, right? So the human mind will fill in, the triangle that doesn't really exist, but that it seems like an implication of the angles, right? So that's reification, like seeing that triangle from this little angle here that doesn't exist, and this little angle here. Like, but when you perceive the triangle that lies within them, that isn't there visually, that isn't there materially, your mind is, enlisting this process of reification to see and to conceptualize and to imagine, what doesn't exist. And then, Marx let's see if I can find it. So Marx's idea is that social organizations, perform this, I'll just use the word, magic as well, right? And I'm doing this because I'm citing for Tucker Carlson. Okay, so here, reification Marxism, Wikipedia. In Marx's philosophy, reification, I don't speak German, but Verdinglichung, making into a thing, is the process by which human social relations, like, for example, slavery, right, and all the justifications for slavery, social oppression, like in the feudal ages, you had to have some justification for the king having all this power and the lords having their place, and that's what the great hierarchy of being did, right? Are perceived as inherent attributes of the people involved in them, or attributes of some product of the relationship, such as trade, involved in them, or attributes of some product of the relationship, such as traded commodity. I'm not sure what that exactly means, like in that sentence, but inherent, meaning reification is the way that the mind makes a material fact or naturalizes, would be another way to say it. Reification is the naturalization of an idea that was originally utilized either as a part of a process of the invention of a social relationship, or to justify that social relationship, right? And this is precisely the function of race, is to justify a particular hierarchy of social relationships that allowed for the trading traffic of human beings, the exploitation of human beings, the torture, mutilation, and lack of compassion for an entire or many sets of cultures and social and types of social relationships with human beings outside of one's own political context and culture. Okay, so I guess we can go to just to prove to Tucker Carlson that race didn't always exist. You can't argue with someone if someone believes that race was created by God, and that and God made these folks Asian, and these folks Caucasian, and these folks and Negroid, I think was the term that was used. Then you're not going to be able to challenge them on that. That's not something that folks like that don't engage in critical conversation regarding the history of ideas, because no matter how much history you show them, they've already reified it, and the reifications, like, there's something like sturdy about the way that they reify these ideas, right? But let's do the citation anyway. I'll just try this: invention of race. All right. This sounds pretty good, but I bet that this is just probably an abstract. Yeah, this is an abstract. Historical foundations of race. This doesn't look like it's an abstract. That's an interesting quote. The world got along without race for the overwhelming majority of its history. The U.S. has never been without it. And that's, again, how one of the reasons why some things get reified. Because if you've never seen anything different, like, how are you going to, like, okay, suppose that, the only food that you ever had was, let's just say it was white peas, right? Like, so the only food that you ever had access to was white peas. You might imagine, like, that's the only thing that you could live on. Like, that's the only food that you could eat. And if someone said, well, like, you can eat fish, you can eat, you can eat salad, you can eat, we have all these different kinds of food. We have cheese, and like, that's not food. It's not white peas. How it doesn't really exist, right? Like that's reification. And the reason it's reified is because you've never seen anything without it. Race is a human invented shorthand term used to describe and categorize people in various social groups. So like I said, like, reification often involves sorting, right? Either silly splitting or loony lumping, or combinations of silly splitting and loony lumping. And that's why a lot of what we do, and part of what we had to teach Aaron to do, is like to critique those kinds of sorting. And we critique them in funny ways by over-sorting, and by creating playlists that sort, and by creating both YouTube video playlists, but also like sorting our music library into a series of space-time travel communication coordinates, and how those sortings work, and what ideas that you require in order to sort in those terms, and what sorting means, and how sorting relates to set theory, and how and so like the mathematical foundations behind certain kinds of sorting principles versus the social construction sortings that we do. And it plays out in a lot of the work that we do. Okay, race, while not a valid biological concept, is a real social construct, which means that it gives rise to real social relations, right? And justifies them in a number of ways. That gives or denies benefits and privileges. That's basically what I'm saying. American society developed the notion of race. Well, the notion of race was already developed before American society. It grows out of that idea of the great chain of being, but then like emerges, at least by the late 16th century, or early 17th century, before the United States existed. And there was slavery in the United States before the United States existed. So what has become the United States, right? The colonies, always had slavery, and always, right, justified. I don't think there were European peoples in the Americas that didn't utilize the construct of race to steal land from Native American peoples, to colonize territories, to justify murder and theft and slavery and oppression and the denial of rights, and I mean, in that sense, it's very much related to the treatment of women and the sorting of men versus women in the great chain of being, which is another facet that we haven't even talked about, but has become more and more relevant in this particular election, perhaps even more so, although there was the obvious demonization of Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election, but it certainly emerged in full force, and misogyny is just part of the Republican agenda at this point, and that's pretty clear and frightening in its own way. Anyway, this is my citation on this, I guess, and how race is just a human-invented concept that's become reified in the minds of a group of people, and that is even for those individuals who believe in race that don't consider themselves racist, right? So I'll just come out right now. I don't believe in race and I don't believe in the great chain of being either. I mean, the great chain of being is this tribally sort of focused, egocentric idea, right? Anthrocentric idea that we're always the best, right? And so, like, if it's applied to men, males who have the power in the system, it's like, well, men are better than women. If it's applied to humans, well, humans are better than animals. No one's going to say that, well, we're better than lizards, but we're not as good as dolphins or whatever, unless you're, I guess, a tourist in the, what is the thing, Hitchhiker's Guide, to the Galaxy. If you're one of those hitchhikers, then, maybe, you might say that, the dolphins are very smart. And maybe they're better than we are. I don't know. But it tends to be like the ego that's doing the talking that always puts itself on top, right? And then, then what about God if we're on the top of that, and the angels? Well, Marx might not say this, but he might, I don't know. But Freud would certainly say, well, that's a projection. So like the angels and God are just a projection of the best self, right? Like that, this egocentric subject can create and place above itself precisely because it's acknowledging, right, the sublimation of the best part of that self into this allegory figure of itself. Anyway, that's what I imagine that Freud would say from other things that he said about God as a projection of the Father, right? So it goes on and it talks about all of this and how white and slave and race, these ideas, were all tied together. So white, the idea of people, particularly the European people being white, emerges around the same time that this idea of race emerges. And it's here it says 1500s. That sounds about right. So it's later than the Great Chain of Being, but its foundation, in a certain sense, is the Great Chain of Being. And so these terms, white and race, are always, part of the same thing. You can't say like, I believe in race, and but that's not a problem, because it has nothing to do with the history of social organizations and slavery, because it had everything to do with the history of social relations and slavery. But there you go. So that's my citation. Oh, and like another thing about the sorting and the reification, like who gets to placed in these categories of white, versus non-white, or Asian versus non-Asian, or or black versus non-black, changes over time. Like in the United States, like if you were an Italian immigrant at one time, you weren't really considered white, right? They might not use the word black as in black African, but they would use the word swarthy, right? So it's dark, and all of that, like that ambiguousness around like the difference between the absolute values of white and black is totally part of the way that apartheid is always structured. Well, maybe not always, but was certainly a part of the way that apartheid was structured in South Africa. And you have these like silly splitting, sortings of, you know, what constituted color and what constituted mulatto and what constituted black and what constituted white, and none of these groups or of individuals were legally allowed, you know, to fraternize with one another. And there were probably some that were allowed in certain movements, and but all of it, you know, belying, you know, the lie that such a thing even exists, you know, and so the sortings have always been there. Irish, I mean, like Irish immigrants in America, you know, in the United States, weren't always considered white, right? And so the categories themselves, which, you know, depending on how racist you are, you know, and how, you know, and how much you've reified the concept, right? You'll have a hard time even understanding that Irish people maybe weren't once white, right? Because it's like, well, what do you mean? Of course they're white, because they're white now, right? And so that's a reification and like a loss of history, a loss of cultural knowledge and cultural memory, a loss of historical memory. And it's precisely these, you know, it's what reification does, and it's what black and white thinking does. It's what tribal thinking does, is it erases the idea of history and the ability, right, to think critically about terms and ideas that we might take for granted that have no value in actual science or actual reality or in a social construct, you know, that we would really, you know, want to believe in this country that, you know, purports to continue to be a democracy. And so that's the final citation. I don't think I really have anything else to say about this first pair of images in the slide. I'll run it with the Amadul 2 sound from the beginning, and then we'll just fade out. Let me see, I think I need to turn on the volume. Hold on. All right, ready?